The attempt made this summer by U.S. forces to rescue hostages being held by ISIL reflects this commitment. But very simply, if we are to protect our citizens and avoid bankrolling our adversaries, every country must adopt and implement a no-ransoms policy. This norm is beginning to take shape. Last year, the G8 unequivocally rejected the payment of ransoms to terrorists, and this year, members of the UN Security Council have twice adopted resolutions reaffirming their shared commitment to seek the safe release of hostages without making monetary or political concessions. Going forward, as we seek to prevent kidnappings from occurring and remain dedicated to freeing those taken, we will continue to urge partner nations to subscribe to a no-ransom policy. At the same time, we will look to use our counterterrorism sanctions authorities against those who demand or receive ransoms on behalf of terrorist organizations. We're also concerned about external donor networks. To prevent ISIL from raising funds from donors abroad, we will continue to identify its financial supporters and target them for sanctions. We have long focused on disrupting the funding networks of ISIL and its predecessor, AQI. In fact, we've applied sanctions against more than 24 individuals associated with AQI or ISIL over the past 10 or so years. And we will continue to target those who would exploit the suffering of innocent people in Syria and Iraq to raise money for their extremist agendas, whether in support of ISIL or any other terrorist group. In the months ahead, we plan to accelerate our efforts to identify targets for sanctions and take actions against them through our counterterrorism authorities. In September, President Obama led the UN Security Council in unanimously passing a binding resolution to stem the flow of foreign terrorist fighters into and out of Iraq and Syria. Security Council Resolution 2178 aims specifically to prevent and suppress the flow of foreign fighters and money to ISIL and al-Nusra funds, and we are working with others to implement it swiftly. And we are working especially closely with our friends in the Gulf, who are stalwart partners in the anti-ISIL coalition, to ensure that they all have the tools in place to combat terrorist financing and that they all use these tools effectively. We especially appreciate the close collaboration and strong steps taken by the Emiratis and the Saudis to combat ISIL financing. Even though ISIL does not currently rely heavily on the traditional donor model for terrorist financing, that is no reason to relax our efforts in this area. Particularly as we make progress in disrupting ISIL's current sources of income, and as ISIL gains additional prominence in the global terrorist movement, we must be prepared for the possibility that wealthy extremists will increasingly seek to fund it. As for disrupting the revenue that ISIL generates from extortion and other local criminal activities, we recognize that Treasury's tools are not particularly well suited to the task. We can and we will identify and designate the individuals who oversee ISIL's extortion networks, calling attention to those who are brutalizing the people of Iraq and Syria. But our experience in combating AQI's extortion networks, which ISIL mimics, drives home the point that shutting down the revenue flow from ISIL's extortion networks ultimately will require breaking its hold on territory. Other lines of effort in the anti-ISIL coalition are focused on this crucial objective. Nonetheless, even where Treasury's financial tools cannot cut off certain revenue streams, we still have a crucial role to play. And that brings me to the second key element of our strategy. As we work to disrupt ISIL's sources of income, we are focused on restricting ISIL's access to the international financial system in order to impair its ability to collect funds from abroad and to move, store, and use the funds it acquires locally. ISIL's ability to make the most effective use of the money that it raises depends on access to the banking system in Syria, Iraq, and internationally. Operating entirely in cash is both cumbersome and risky. Cash is bulky, vulnerable to theft, and requires complicated logistics to transport. Moreover, ISIL will have a hard time funding external operations, including facilitating the movement of foreign fighters, without access to the international financial system. To that end, we are working to limit ISIL's ability to transact through the Iraqi, Syrian, and international banking systems, Scores of bank branches are located in territories where ISIL currently operates. Through cooperation with the Iraqi authorities, bank headquarters, and the international financial community, we aim to prevent ISIL from using those bank branches. The private sector is also playing a key role in this element of our strategy. Bank Secrecy Act reports filed with the Treasury by financial institutions provide the U.S. government with valuable insight into financial activity in areas where ISIL operates. We carefully review these reports for indications of ISIL financing and quickly disseminate information to the appropriate authorities. The third element of our strategy draws on our time-tested approach to countering the financing of terrorism. That is, we will continue to dismantle ISIL's financial foundation through targeting for designation of its leadership, supporters, and financial facilitators. Running a terrorist organization, especially one that, like ISIL, spans hundreds of miles, is both costly and bureaucratically challenging. In order to keep track of all its revenues and costs, ISIL depends on complex management networks, with CFO-like figures at the top. As we identify the individuals that make up those networks, we will expose and designate them. We've seen from our fight against Al-Qaeda